Every company right now is spending money teaching leaders how to use AI, but almost none of them are teaching leaders how to think in the age of AI. That gap is about to matter a lot. Here's what I mean. Walk into any leadership offsite this year, and you'll find some version of the same agenda: an AI tools demo, AI prompt engineering session, maybe a vendor presentation about what's coming next in the world of AI. And leaders leave with a new app on their laptop and a vague mandate to integrate AI into their workflow. What they don't leave with is a stronger, more discerning judgment in the fast-moving age of AI. They don't leave with any of the capabilities that are rising in value as AI gets more capable. And here's the part that very few people are saying out loud in those sessions. The organizations running that training are not building more effective leaders. They're building leaders who are better at using tools that are already commoditized, while the skills that differentiate them on the senior level go undeveloped. Hi, I'm Keith, and I work with directors and VPs alongside some of the most AI-saturated organizations in tech. The pattern I keep seeing is this: the leaders who are pulling ahead are not the ones who learn the most AI. They're the ones who identified the 5 capabilities that AI can't replicate and built deliberately towards them, while everyone else is in some ChatGPT workshop learning how to write the best prompt. That's what this video is about. The 5 key skills, what they are, why AI structurally cannot automate them, and why most leaders, including the ones on your team, are not building them fast enough. Here's the reframe I want to offer you before we get into the list. This is not a humans versus AI conversation. I'm certainly not going to tell you that AI is coming for your job, because that framing really misses the actual mark. The actual risk is this: AI is making a specific set of human capabilities more valuable, not less. And most leaders right now are investing in everything except those capabilities. McKinsey put it plainly in their January 2026 research on leadership in the AI era. As AI handles more of the routine cognitive work, what remains is a narrower, higher level set of distinctly human functions. The leaders who are building those functions are becoming harder to replace, but the leaders who aren't are becoming interchangeable. So again, the question isn't, will AI replace me? The question is, am I building the right things while everyone else is chasing certifications and taking courses? Okay, so here are the 5. The first skill is contextual judgment. And I want to be precise about what I mean, because this is not the same thing as experience or domain knowledge. Contextual judgment is the ability to weigh ambiguous, incomplete, and sometimes contradictory information and make it a defensible call while bearing full accountability for what happens next. AI can't do this, not because it lacks data at all, but it's because it lacks skin in the game. Now, here's the thing that strategy science research from 2026 made clear. Strategy value doesn't come from aggregated consensus. It comes from disagreement, idiosyncrasies, and judgment that cuts against the grain. AI is built solely on pattern recognition across massive populations of data. It optimizes for what is average, and strategy lives in that exception. A Harvard and UC Berkeley study confirmed this in a direct way. When lower performing leaders used AI, they took generic recommendations at face value. And what happened? They backfired. When higher performing leaders used the same tools, they applied the outputs with discrimination. They knew when to trust the output and when to override it. So this is saying that the differentiator isn't the newest tool, it's the judgment and discernment you have as a leader. Here's the leadership reality. When a decision has real consequences for real stakeholders, accountability flows to a human. The AI doesn't get called into the exec review, you do. And in that room, your judgment is the only thing that matters. Most leadership development treats judgment as a precondition, not something that you develop over time. Now, that's a huge mistake. Judgment is a practice. It sharpens through deliberate exposure to high-stakes decisions, through reviewing calls you made 6 months ago and asking whether you'd make the same one today. Now, the leaders building this are becoming indispensable in rooms where AI outputs are on the table, but the call still has to be human. The second skill is strategic synthesis. Different from judgment and worth keeping separate. Synthesis is the ability to take large volumes of information, including quantitative signals, stakeholder dynamics, or constraints, and market context, and construct a coherent directional view that others can act on. AI, as we know, is very good at analysis, but it is not good at this kind of synthesis. McKinsey's research on AI and strategy development is explicit about this. As the ease of generating insights grows, so does the value of executive level synthesis. The technology gets better at producing inputs. Your role moves decisively towards integrating those inputs into something an organization can actually move on. So here's what that looks like in practice. AI gives you a summary of the competitive landscape. It surfaces 10 data points about consumer behavior. It produces a draft of the strategic options. All of that is very useful, but synthesis is the part where you understand what the organization is capable of, where you know which option is politically feasible and which one dies in the CFO meeting, where you time the decision right, and frame it in a way that gets people moving instead of debating. While you use data to form this, the synthesis is all you. Now, the neglect problem here is real. Synthesis is slow. It looks like thinking. In organizations that reward output volume, synthesis doesn't produce deliverables. It produces clarity, which is harder to put in a quarterly review. And because of this, leaders under pressure to show AI wins are filling their time with tool demonstrations and process automations, while the harder cognitive work of framing what should actually be built or changed goes completely undone. Earlier in 2026, MIT Sloan researcher Barry O'Reilly found that roughly 95% of AI initiatives that introduce tools without redesigning how decisions are made fail to produce meaningful business value. The constraint isn't the technology, though. It's the ability to synthesize information into a judgment that the org can act on. Synthesis is your leverage point. Start building the skill now. The third skill is relationship orchestration. And this one is harder to talk about without sounding soft. So let me frame it precisely. Relationship orchestration is the ability to build trust, align stakeholders across different interests, and mobilizing people in a direction they wouldn't have moved towards on their own. Yes, AI can generate a message, but it can't build a full relationship. Those are not the same thing. Only an empathetic leader can identify preferences, map the right people to the right projects, and enroll an organization in a strategic plan. Leaders can't delegate aspiration setting. Aspiration is what mobilizes people, and aspiration requires a human who people believe in. The Future of Jobs report in 2025 drew from over 1,000 companies and more than 14 million workers. Leadership and social influence, talent management, and resilience were identified as skills that remain critical through 2030, even as the fast-growing skills are technical AI capabilities. In roles where AI handles more of the routine cognitive tasks, relationship orchestration becomes the primary value add of a senior leader. Here's the subtle risk, though, I want to name. Leaders who rely heavily on AI-generated communication are gradually losing the craft of direct human expression. And they might not say it, but their stakeholders notice. There's just a flatness to the communication, a polish that is just too smooth. Real trust is built through accumulated, specific experience with a specific human over time. It requires consistency, conflict repair, and being present in difficult moments. There's no automation path for that. The leaders who protect and invest in their relationship breadth right now, while their peers are spending those hours on tool certifications, are building a trust network that will be a structural asset for years. The fourth skill is ethical discernment. Now, let's talk about what this means, as I want to differentiate it from corporate compliance. Ethical discernment is the ability to identify when an action, even a technically correct and legally compliant one, conflicts with the values of the ways that won't show up in the metrics. This is the ability to see the harm in the outcome before it becomes the outcome. And another way of saying this is the ability to make a hard call and own what follows from that. The research on AI and moral reasoning is conclusive on this point. A 2025 peer-reviewed benchmark in Scientific Reports found that AI safety frameworks detect harmful outputs, but fall short in assessing whether a model shows advanced ethical reasoning or handles conflicting moral dilemmas. LLM-based systems have not reached human-level moral reasoning performance, particularly in the kind of cognitive sensitive, organizationally embedded decisions that senior leaders make every day. Ethical responsibility can't be delegated to AI systems because those systems lack genuine moral agency, the ability to take responsibility, and the ability to generalize ethical reasoning to situations they haven't previously encountered. In a world where agentic AI systems are making more consequential decisions with less direct human involvement, the leader who can set and hold ethical guardrails is not a compliance function. It's a critical organizational asset that companies need to be investing in. However, ethics has historically been treated as a function, not as a competency. In the current acceleration environment, many organizations are moving fast enough that ethical reviews get compressed or skipped entirely. Leaders who raise ethical concerns about AI deployment risk being perceived as slow. But the organizations that build leaders with strong ethical discernment will have a structural advantage as regulation intensifies and as public scrutiny of AI decisions grow. Now, this is definitely a skill that most people are not building deliberately, which means the ones who are will be differentiated in ways that compound over time. The fifth skill is cross-domain thinking, and this is one of the meta skills that determines what gets orchestrated. Cross-domain thinking is the ability to see patterns across different fields, industries, and disciplines and transfer insights from one context to solve problems in another. It's the mental move of asking, what does the answers from over there tell us about the problem over here? Now, AI is very good at pattern recognition with a domain where it has extensive training data. However, it is substantially weaker at analogical reasoning across domains. The January 2026 Philosophy of Science analysis in The Conversation makes this argument in the context of scientific discovery. AI processes existing knowledge efficiently, but it can't generate genuinely new knowledge because it lacks the speculative reasoning and social knowledge construction that produces real innovation. Strategic value emerges where actors see value where others don't. Cross-domain thinkers see value others don't because they're drawing on a broader, more unusual set of reference points. AI, however, trained on consensus is less likely to surface genuinely heterodox insights. Here's the practical version. Leaders who think within their functional lane design AI systems that optimize within that lane. Leaders who think across domains design systems that create new lanes. That's the difference between operational efficiency and strategic differentiation. Now, specialization is still how most professional development is. AI, ironically, makes specialists more efficient, which creates the illusion of competence without the breadth that generates real leverage. Cross-domain thinking atrophies without deliberate cultivation. The leaders who are reading outside their domain, asking, what does this remind me of, and building unusual reference libraries right now are building an edge that their more narrowly focused peers are actively losing. Let me tell you what's actually happening in organizations right now. Training budgets are flowing towards AI literacy. Performance reviews are flagging AI fluency as a gap. The signal is clear. Learning the tools or look behind. The quieter signal, however, the one not being broadcasted with equal urgency, is this. These tools are best used by people who have developed strong judgment, ethical clarity, cross-functional perspectives, and the relationship depth to enroll others in what the tool services. The WEF's data shows that 8 out of the top 10 most requested skills in the US job postings right now are durable human skills. These are things like communication, leadership, critical thinking, collaboration, each appearing in roughly 15 million US postings annually. 39% of core skills required on the job are expected to shift by 2030. And in roles where AI is most present, the importance of human skills has grown by 20% since 2018. Not shrunk, but actually grown. The leaders that recognize this and invest deliberately, while their peers are chasing tool certifications, are building a durable, asymmetric advantage. And this is not a temporary advantage, it's a compounding one. Why, you might ask? It's because AI tools can be learned in a week. Contextual judgment, however, really takes years. And relationship orchestration requires real relationships. Ethical discernment requires sitting in real discomfort until clarity emerges. Now, none of this is scalable or certifiable, which is exactly why it's so valuable. If you're watching this and thinking about your leadership team, specifically the senior managers, the directors, and sometimes VPs you're responsible for developing, and whether they're building these 5 skills or not, I want to give you a starting point. It's called the Career Risk Assessment. It's a free diagnostic that takes about 10 minutes. I'd encourage you to send it to 2 or 3 people on your team before you draw any conclusions about where they're at. What it surfaces is where each leader sits on the operator to orchestrator spectrum right now, where their exposure is the highest, and where the gap is between their current identity and what AI-era leadership actually demands. Most senior leaders I talk to have a general sense that their team needs to develop in this direction. This assessment gives you something more useful than just a general sense. It gives you a specific, grounded starting point for a real development conversation. The link is in the description and it's free to use. Share it with whomever on your team or outside of your team you are thinking about right now. If what you find makes you want to talk about what a structured engagement for your leadership team would look like, that's what the Reinvention Debrief is for. It's a complimentary conversation where we look at your team's specific situation, what the gaps are costing you in terms of decision quality, AI initiative results, and what a focus engagement would actually produce. Both links are in the description. The organizations that look back and feel good about this era are the ones that developed their leadership bench before the pressure became obvious. And now that's your move. Please subscribe, and I hope to see you in the future videos.